many of the people that come into data work come in after a lot of academic success. And the data world is not like that. Started a startup that crashed and burned. I don't think that AI is going to replace data people. I've gotten fired before, and they don't see that the cap is the C-suite. Most people have no idea what it means for data people to develop in their careers. Just starting off at the base level, what does it mean to become senior in data is important. And I'll share right now what that means.
Welcome back to the Insights by Design podcast. We are thrilled to be joined by Solomon Kahn today. Solomon, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I really am excited to chat.
We are thrilled to have you and appreciate you taking time to speak with us. For those who haven't come across you yet, Solomon, would you mind just giving a quick introduction?
Sure. My name is Solomon. I'm a longtime data leader, and I started my data career. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit back before data science was a thing, and transitioned into sort of modern data work as it started to become a thing, because I ended up with an interesting background to do that. I'm currently the founder of a data startup called Delivery Layer, which focuses on customer facing analytics. And I've also just recently started an initiative called Top Data People, which is taking the lessons that I've learned from many years of managing and leading data teams and trying to share what I know with the world.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So, Solomon, your career is impressive. You've got your CFA, you've got your CAIA certifications, and as you've alluded to, you've become a key figure in the data industry. Can you share
Pivotal.
oh gosh, a pivotal moment early in your career that significantly shaped your professional path? I'm struggling with P's today.
All good. And just to clarify, uh, I had the CFA and CAIA designations, although I let them lapse because I don't really work strictly in finance anymore.
This is not financial
Um,
advice.
yeah, this is not financial advice. There are very when you get those, there are very specific rules around how you can use them and what you can say. So I just want to make sure that if I decide I want to come back one day, that they don't get me in trouble. Um, so I started my data career before data science was a thing, right? So I studied operations research in college, which is, optimization and statistics for business decision making. And then I went into what I considered the finance world back then. And yes, my title was analyst, but it was securities analyst. I was analyzing companies to try to help my organization decide whether to make investments or within the financial space. So we were doing a lot of what you would consider to be traditional analysis type of work, but it was just considered finance back then. And then I would say a pivotal moment for me was when I decided, again, before data science came out with its sort of modern iteration of data work. This is probably 15 years ago or 14 years ago. I decided that I wanted to explore technology because I felt strongly that most of the cool things that were going to get done in my lifetime were going to be in technology or involving technology. And and it wasn't the next hedge fund that was going to change the world. It was going to be the next technology company. So I quit my finance job. I taught myself web programming. I started a startup that crashed and burned. And then I decided, instead of going back to another finance job, I went into a technology job, and I worked as a programmer. And I felt like, because I had gotten great training on the finance side, if I could also get similarly great training on the technology side, then whatever I wanted to do in the long run, I'd have a good background to figure it out, whether I wanted to, because I felt like business impact happens when you combine that business understanding with technology. And I got lucky because I was working as a developer right when data science started to become a thing. I was already essentially the data person because I was the only developer who knew what revenue meant. And so I'd already do all of the business stuff. And then data science, that article came out in the HBR around data science being this incredible career path, or this new job that was emerging, and I jumped on it and raised my hand and said, "Why don't I do this?" And then I've been leading data teams and data businesses kind of ever since.
So the pivotal, the oh gosh, I cannot say this word, Andrew and Solomon. I'm so sorry. Pivotal. So the pivotal moment early in your career was finding the Harvard Business Review article about data science, and that changed your career path.
A little, I would say it was, I would say that it was branching. I would say it's more branching out from traditional finance into technology that was more important than finding that article. Because I actually think that I was leaning in this type of direction regardless, combining my data skill, like my analysis skills, as well as my technology programming skills in order to drive business value. I think the modern work that we call data kind of took that and made it official. But I think there were a lot of unofficial roles like that even before data science. And that was kind of where my career was going.
And it's easy to stay in your bubble in any industry, especially finance. I also come from a financial background where you're encouraged to go deep, and especially with you having previously having your CFA, where it's very specialized in financial analysis. And a lot of folks don't branch out, which is fine. We do need those specialists, but you have a pattern of branching out. You're a serial entrepreneur, founder of Memoir Place, head of data science at Bionic Solution, and now the founder and CEO of Delivery Layer. Can you tell us a little more about what Delivery Layer does and what motivated you to found it?
Sure. So before, one of the other big jobs that we didn't talk about yet is I was at Nielsen for a long time. And I own the P&L of the Nielsen sports business, which is, we analyze essentially every second of professional sports that are aired on TV for what brands are on the screen, and then we help all of the different people that care about that understand how that drives value. So if you're a team or you're a brand or you're a league or a federation, you want to understand what value you're driving from the sponsorships that you're selling or buying. I had done some other work as well. One of the things that I recognized was that all of the innovation in the world of data is, or most of the tools in the world of data are all focused on supporting internal decision making. And then the minute that you need to get your data outside your company, the entire ecosystem falls apart because there are all of these assumptions around security and accessibility and permissions and what your product even needs to be that are true internally that are not true when you need to get data to people that are outside your company, right? Like, and so and I experienced this firsthand at Nielsen and at other places, and that's what ultimately inspired me to start Delivery Layer. I felt like it should be easy for a company to share data externally because actually, surprisingly, that's oftentimes some of the most important data in your company, right? Sometimes it's like your product is the data. But other times, like you need to share data with supply chain partners or with other external stakeholders. Data doesn't accidentally leave your company unless there's a major mistake somewhere, right? So every time data needs to leave your company, there's a really important reason, oftentimes customers and revenue. And so I felt like that should be a supported use case, and that's where Delivery Layer came from.
And I saw at Mass Mutual when we were doing CCPA and GDPR. Most companies have hundreds of vendors that they work with and share data. And with CCPA, particularly, you have if you've ever shared data with that vendor, if a customer is eligible to delete that data, you have to ensure that that vendor then downstream deletes that data and then reports back up. And we had such a hard time figuring out how are we going to communicate that in a secure way and share that data. And then we did a janky secure FTP process just to get it across the finish line and not get hammered by regulations. How have regulations helped shape your product?
Yeah, it's a great question, and so far they haven't been a major factor. Most of the customers that I have worked with early on are more data product companies. So data is their product, and so they need to get it out. But from the marketplace perspective, data, like regulations where you need to share data with other companies in a secure way, is a major driving force behind data sharing in general. So most of the companies that I've worked with so far don't fall into that category, but there are many companies for whom that is a major issue, and need to get data outside their company.
And you mentioned the companies having data as their product. And one of the hot topics right now is data products. And there's not a
Sure.
solid or consistent definition across the industry. How do you delineate data as a product versus data products? Since you're the specialist in the area, what are your definitions?
I have my operating definitions, but I don't think any one person can decide for the industry what things should be, which is why I try to be specific when I speak with people. So for example, delivery layer, um, it we deliver data through web applications and APIs, right? And the data products, generally, when I talk to customers, I consider a data product as, um, when your data is used by customers, right? Like, and that could be like how it gets delivered it doesn't really matter. Um, so it could be a recommendation system that is inside of your e-commerce product or your e-commerce store, right? That's still a data product because customers are using it. And I see internal data products as systems. I just call them systems because all of our other internal tools, we generally call them systems. If you have an HR system, it's your HR system or your applicant tracking system or your expense system or whatever it is. So for me, the way that I like to split it is that products are something that in some way touches your customers, and systems are your internal things.
I love it. Thank you.
You alluded to a startup failure early in your career. Can you tell us a little more about a failure in your career that helped propel you forward?
Sure, I've failed many times. A failure is tough. There've been so many. Let's see. So, well, obviously the startup failure was a big one. I would say I got fired before, and I've talked about this. I think it's one of those things where a lot of people, many people know that data leadership jobs are risky and challenging, and data leaders often get fired, but almost nobody ever admits that actually it did happen to them. So I've gotten fired before. Hell, it on the one hand, it's funny. I have a post in draft on this topic, so it's great. On the one hand, it taught me a huge amount. On the other hand, it taught me nothing. So one of the benefits of getting fired is that afterwards you get to obsess about all of the things that you could have done differently. And because data jobs in general, and in particular data leadership, is not a job about where you should expect perfection ever. Like, it's a job where you're at the cutting edge, dealing with, if the business question was easy and low stakes, they wouldn't bother you in the first place. If the business question was super easy to answer, then they wouldn't need you, right? So you're dealing, and if the systems are super easy to put together, also they wouldn't need you. So you're dealing with all of this complexity around your business, around your political organization, around the technology systems that you have, and you're trying to solve really challenging problems. So data work is like, anybody who comes into data work thinking that it is either an easy job or that it's a job where you should expect things to go perfectly is in for a rude awakening. And many people experience that rude awakening because many of the people that come into data work come in after a lot of academic success, where academic success comes with not doing anything wrong. And the data world is not like that. And that can be a tough transition for many people. So, one of the benefits of getting fired is that you can think back to all of the different things that you've done wrong, or all of the different things that you could have done better, and think about ways that you could have done those things differently. And having that really deep introspection, I think, was really helpful as I moved forward as a leader, because there were some things that I wouldn't have done differently, and there were some things that I would have done differently, and they helped me solidify the kind of data leader that I wanted to be. At the same time, it kind of taught me nothing, because when you get fired, and this is something that I have seen and learned from being a part of many different kind of organizations. It's interesting. So I got fired from my job at Paperless Post, which is in my when I sort of started the data team there, grew it, and then at some point got fired. After that, I went to a consulting company where I had the opportunity to like kind of be a leader in multiple different initiatives across really big companies. So I got to see like 20 different teams in a very short period of time. And then my next job at Nielsen, I had the opportunity to also be a part of a number of different businesses. And I had the opportunity to lead a large team and see how big companies work. And the reality is that when you get fired, you never really know why you get fired. Like, as much as anybody thinks, sometimes, like if you have particularly poor performance, it's just very clear you're not doing a good job, and that's why. But anytime there's like like I can talk about some of the organizational shifts that happened afterwards to say, oh, that's why it happened. But truthfully, you never really know. And there's only so much you can learn when you don't even know why something happened. And so that's why, on the one hand, it taught me a lot, because it had helped me introspect and think about more about the kind of data lead that I wanted to be going forward. And at the same time, like, I don't actually know exactly why it happened, and I never will. And that's just the way that these things work. And that's probably a more open answer than most other people will ever give. So I hope I hope your audience appreciates it.
No, that's excellent. I really appreciate your emphasis on ambiguity and introspection and growth. I wanted to try to break it down a little further into a practical application. And you can imagine yourself as a job candidate who has something like being fired on your resume, or as someone as a chief data officer who potentially hires a lot of people. How can job interviewees successfully deal with something like being fired from a previous job in an interview setting, assuming it wasn't for any egregious ethical misconduct?
Sure. Um, I I have gotten a number of jobs since then, senior jobs. I have always been totally open about it. If anybody asks, or not, and even when they don't ask, I just tell them this is where I was. This is what happened, and then I keep it moving. Because to me, I just don't think it matters that much. I think most people, everybody senior knows that these things happen for reasons that are outside of anybody's control or not anybody's fault. And even if they are your fault, again, in what you said, in an environment with lots of ambiguity, what does that even mean, right? So I always felt strongly that trying to hide it or trying to make it seem like it didn't happen was way worse than just saying, hey, here's who I am. This is what I bring to the table. This is my background. I did a lot of stuff there, right? Like, I was also probably the most promoted person in the company before I got, right. So it's like it wasn't this disastrous type of situation that was all bad. Like, I had a lot of good things that I could bring to the table and things that I can do. And I think the same is true with everyone. When I've interviewed people, almost everyone generally just says what it was. It's like, yeah, I got let go. The company was restructuring, or the CTO wanted to go in a different direction, and you just say it and you keep it moving. I don't expect anybody to even be able to dive deep into the reasons that they get fired, because the reality is, from being on the other side of the table and having fired people as a leader, oftentimes people don't know. They don't know, and even if they do kind of know, anyways. So that's my answer: is if you get fired, you can say it. It's not it's not disqualifying for me or for any of the places that have hired me. But I'm sure there have been some places that have looked at my background and said, oh, he hasn't been perfect everywhere, and maybe decided not to. But I actually don't think so.
That's great advice. I was fired early in my career, and it was my fault. I know why I got fired. And for the next job, I didn't bring it up. And then it showed up on my background check and they rescinded the offer as they should have. So then from then on, even now, even though I've had tons of senior jobs after that, I make it very clear up front so that that never happens again. I'm like, I got fired. And as you noted, nobody cares. They're like, okay, it's fine. That was a tough lesson when
Nobody
I
cares.
got a job offer
Yeah.
and then they rescinded it because it showed up. That's how you learn lessons about always be truthful. It's also helped because I was in a stressful situation, flying by the seat of my pants in a fast moving environment with a lot of chaos, and that was one of the reasons that led to my poor decision making. So now working in a startup, I see people flying by the seat of their pants. I'm like, maybe slow down a little bit because you can get, but like, just maybe don't sign that contract without running it through legal first. Like, let's take a little break.
Yeah.
In one of your LinkedIn posts, you emphasize the importance of building products that users will pay for. How do you approach the challenge of identifying and validating user needs before fully developing a product?
Great question. I don't think there's a extreme, like, people try to make this scientific. I found that it's tough to be scientific. Where if you do some survey, then with this, like the size of the problem or whatever, you get some evidence that you can spin into a story that companies will pay. Oftentimes a lot of that doesn't pan out because until you're actually asking them to pay and sign a contract, they're like, it's easy to say in the early stages that someone likes an idea, and it's a lot harder to actually get it across the finish line. So one of the things, and I learned this actually in my time at Bionic, that would have been very helpful for my memoir place experience, is that you try to get people to make some sort of actual commitment to where it might not be a signed contract, but maybe they'll sign a letter of intent to be a design partner, or maybe they'll agree to a 1 day workshop helping you design the UI. Or maybe if it is, there are other circumstances where it's an existing customer and everybody's hesitant to be like, we're thinking about, they like, oh, we want this feature, or we want this new data set, or we want this new product. And then you say, oh, that's great. Is this really helpful for you? Yes, this is really helpful. Okay, that's a good enough reason. You can follow up and say, well, all right, like, would you be open to us adding 50K to the contract if we were to go out and build this? And then you get a lot better of information back from them to be like, either actually, yeah, we would be okay with that. Like, let's do it. Like, we'll sign. Or they'll say, oh no, we just wanted it thrown in for free. So I don't think there's a way to scientifically prove it, but besides for actually doing it. But I think that there are I think that so many people are afraid to ask, and then as a result get blindsided further down the process after they've already invested a lot in building things. Um, so that's my take on that.
I think that's really great advice, and we see that from Shark Tank, where people bring up the TAM and nobody cares. They're like, "We have a $10 billion TAM." I'm like, "Yeah, it's pretend. Nobody
Yeah.
cares." And even now, working in startups, it's like when you try to think of a new product feature, you do have to justify, at least if you're not the founder, right? You have to justify with the, here's my estimated TAM, SAM, SALM, and it's not real until somebody's paying for it, until we can really prove that somebody will value it enough to give us more money for that. So that's really great advice, Salman.
With the rapid advancements in AI and machine learning, how do you see the role of data scientists evolving in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, and I think taking a step back, um, like, a lot of this ties into what I'm trying to do with top data people, which is that there's this question of, is it the tools that make the big difference, or is it the team that makes the big difference? And the individual skill sets of the data people on your data team. And I'm a big believer that actually it's the individual data people and their skills that are making a lot of the difference for companies. And that really great data people have this massively disproportionate impact. Every data leader knows this implicitly. Like if you go to any leader of a big team and you ask them like how different would your life be if you had 5 more of your top data person, they would like they would go nuts. Like they'd be like, "Oh my god, my life would be insanely different. Like everything would be better," because they know that the people who are really really skilled at data, and data work is a craft, it's skill. It's not something that is just like a color by numbers job. Like, like it's not the accounts payable department that needs to pay the bills on time and there's a specific like binary, did you pay the bills on time or not, right? Top data people can have an uncapped impact on your company if they come up with a way that your company could make an extra $200 million a year. That data person just brought $200 million a year in value to your company. So uh, so I believe that the ability to do that is not easily replaced by AI. And so therefore, I believe that AI tools are going to help data people. They're going to help data people do more and be able to handle more complexity. But I don't think it replaces the need for skilled data people. And we all know that AI is just giving you sort of like probabilistic next word of what to do. It can't tell you this is a smart business strategy. It can just it doesn't have the ability to like make have the type of conviction that is necessary to work closely with senior executives and to help drive impact inside of a business. So for that reason, I don't think that AI is going to replace data people. But I do think that having AI around to like spit out a draft of a random little script that you were going to write, and just instead of spending 3 hours on a script, you only need to spend 45 minutes because you've got like the draft already laid out in a reasonable way. Like that stuff is great. So that's my take on AI. I'm not sold yet on AI as an interface for insights because I think there are challenges with that. I don't think that's necessary. Like people like tools have been trying the AI self-service generate like not yeah, the NLP self-service generated insights even before generative AI. I'm not sure if the issue there has been the technology not being there or rather the actual use case for people not being that.
So I want to just quickly reemphasize a point that you brought up that I thought was really interesting. So it's not just about the tool, no matter how fancy the tool is, and it's not just about the team, no matter how cohesive the team is. A lot of business impact comes from the individual skill sets of the individual team members. And so if companies really want to evolve to confront future challenges, they should invest in the professional development of their data people.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I mean, I can't stress this enough because most data work, even if you have a good cohesive data team, most of the actual data work is one on one or one on a couple where your data team members are out in the field doing work. And this is, for example, why code reviews are always so challenging in data organizations because unlike software engineers where everybody is working on the same system and has sort of a shared understanding and ownership of those systems, data work is just an independent person generally doing work, even data engineering oftentimes. So what ends up happening is that you don't have the same context and understanding. So you're just generally looking through the code to get a high level of does anything seem very off, right? Um, Ultimately, so much of the success of a data organization is going to be decided in those moments of one individual data person doing work. Even if the team is cohesive, even if the team has built a solid data infrastructure, even if like the team all gets along with everybody, like it's the individual. It's sort of it's similar to sales, right? like your company sells when an individual salesperson, yes, supported by a team and a company, but like there's a lot of work. And so would you ever think of a world where companies didn't train their salespeople? No. It's like well understood that salespeople need a lot of training. And I think that in the data world, we have a lot of training for people who want to break into the industry. If you want to learn a technical tool, if you want to learn the basics, there is a lot of information out there. But if you want to actually be good once you're in, there is almost nothing. So that's kind of where Top Data People comes from.
I love that. And it's easy to be a passenger, especially in a big company. There's drivers and there's passengers, and often we call them A players. I don't know how great that is, but we call them that. They're drivers. They're always looking to improve. They're driven to excel, and they can be held back by folks who are just doing the bare minimum. And the larger an organization gets, the more passengers can sneak on the bus. And so which is a tough challenge for hiring for that mindset is difficult. So looking for folks like yourself, where you can clearly see a pattern of Solomon saw an opportunity and went and built something. Solomon saw an opportunity and went and built something. Zach Wilson is another great example that lots of people follow on LinkedIn. He sees something, he goes and builds something. He talks about he saw something at Netflix, he fixed it. He saw something at Facebook, he fixed it. Where it's very easy to not look for something, like just to be given your work and be a KPI person. And those people may be replaced by AI, but it's that drive and that business context that can't be replaced by AI.
Yes, well, thank you. It's
Very difficult.
Yeah, it's very, very kind words. So thank you. But ultimately, um, I think most data people are those kind of drivers because data is not something you kind of accidentally end up in. Some people, yes, but like most people have already taken active steps to decide because it's like such a multifaceted career. So oftentimes people who go in need to independently learn a couple of different things on the technology side in order to even get a job, right? So I think data people, excuse me, are disproportionately those types of people as you described who are willing to go out and work and learn and develop. And for me, what I am trying to do is channel that a little bit, channel what's already there into areas where it isn't as easy to learn, such as like the non-technical side of data work, but ultimately has this absolutely massive impact on your company and then it, short time later on your career.
And you've alluded to it a few times, but we haven't really dove into it. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at Top Data People?
Sure. So Top Data People is a website as part of my marketing strategy for Delivery Layer, I felt like I was going to go broad on LinkedIn and other social platforms and start to talk about what I've learned in my data career, and that some percentage of the people who follow me will have a need for a customer facing analytics platform. And when they do, they would want to check out Delivery Layer. And over time, that kind of grew into its own thing where I developed like a relatively substantial audience. And I found that like there was only so much I could communicate in like 150 word LinkedIn post. And I felt like if I really wanted to, I felt like the ultimate benefit was that I was going to get back was a function of the impact that I had, and the impact of the little tiny posts was just like it was okay, but it wasn't as deep as it could be. Like, and so I had come up with this idea of why don't I do like a course of all of my best knowledge about what top data people do differently, right? I've managed a couple hundred data people in my career. I've seen a lot about what's worked and what hasn't worked. Why don't I synthesize all of that and just like put it out as a course? And then ultimately I felt like just a course was not enough. Like what people really needed was like a course plus a little bit of help implementing plus a little bit of a community. And so that's where Top Data People came in. So I started this 6-month professional development program at Top Data People, which is a paid program. And then I have some free stuff as well. So I've got a free course on breaking into data. I've got a free course that ended up being like 4 hours long on how to get promoted if you're a data person. And I've got some stuff on data products. And it's kind of like a place where I can share my lessons in a brand that makes sense, as opposed to trying to figure out what's the connection between delivery layer and Top Data People. It's kind of just like very clear, like this is a brand that's and a site that's out there to help people be top data people.
Not to spoil the program, but can you give us an idea of some of the things that Top Data People do differently? Just give us a little teaser.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. Um, so, so I think it's important, even at the base level, most people have no idea what it means for data people to develop in their careers. And so I think just starting off at the base level of what does it mean to become senior in data is important. And I'll share right now what that means, which is that for me, I think there's sort of 2 stages in your data career. And the first stage is where you go from like junior to senior. And that stage is all about developing your personal skill set. And so when you're a junior data person, the expectation is that you're able to do sort of standard data work with assistance and with guidance. And then when you are a mid-level data person, you are able to do standard data work without guidance. And then when you're a senior data person, you're able to do complex data work without guidance. And so if you're wondering, how do I know whether I'm a junior data person or mid-level data person or senior data person? Put yourself on that spectrum and give yourself like peg yourself, and then you can decide, okay, where am I? And in order to get to the next level, that's really what it is. If you want to go from junior to mid-level, it's all about being able to be trusted to just execute without assistance. If you want to go from mid-level to senior, it's about knowing that out of the 50 projects that the team did, right, I saw what the more complicated ones were and what the simpler ones were. Am I able to work on those more complicated ones independently and come up with how they're going to get done? And if yes, then you yourself can judge yourself as a senior data person. And if not, if you're like, well, I would probably still need some help figuring out the data architecture, or figuring out how to deploy it, or figuring out X, Y, and Z, those are the gaps that you have between mid-level and senior. After senior is phase 2. And that's where it starts to shift from your personal skill set to how you're able to successfully take that personal skill set and drive impact in both your company and your industry. And so typically what'll come next, and by the way, this goes for any data job: analyst, scientist, engineer, PM, whatever. PM has its own titles, but the ideas are still the same. So next is you go to lead. And at a lead, the expectation is that your influence is not just on your individual work, but it expands across your team. And so because you are there as a lead, your whole team is able to be far more effective, and you're bringing up the level of your team as a lead. And then above a lead, you start to need to bring up a wider swath of the organization or the company, right? Now you're not now, because of your skill set, you're not just bringing up your team, you're bringing up your entire division or your entire data engineering organization, because you are able to unblock things, help people work together, understand technical things. Like, you're able to do the kind of work that has an impact like this. And this is also when you start to think about outside of your company and the impact that you have outside of your company. Are you someone who is attracting the top data people to come and work with you? That starts to become important as you are more senior. And so to me, that's the spectrum of how you can move up. At the top of that spectrum, in the second phase, there are a lot of interesting titles and jobs that you wouldn't necessarily have as like data jobs necessarily, but they are data plus something, right? Like VP of strategy or chief strategy officer or chief measurement officer or chief insights officer or chief something. Like people who understand how to drive a business and who are extremely well respected in their industry, they have very senior jobs. I actually think this is something that data analysts typically think that there's a cap, and they don't see that the cap is the C-suite. So that's just one thing. I've got a lot more, but I'll pause because I just ranted for like 5 minutes.
That was
there.
an excellent teaser. Thank you for being so generous in your response.
I can't wait to cut these into YouTube shorts, Solomon. You just dropped tons of tons of nuggets that I can't wait to share with the community. Well, as we wrap up here, I've learned so much, and I really can't wait to get this out to the community. I want to wrap with this. So you worked as the publisher of the Comical magazine, the playbill for comedy clubs in New York and Boston. Given your penchant for comedy, who are your go-to comedians today?
Oh my God, that's so funny. I got totally burnt out of comedy during that experience, I have to say. I mean, there were a lot of things that I did wrong with that. Starting a physical magazine as the internet was exploding for comedians was probably not a smart idea. But let's see, who are some of the fun people that I met back in the day? I will say, like, probably Dave Attell, who was the
Oh,
first ever like cover interviewee on the first comical magazine way back in the day. So I'll put him out there as sort of like an OG, like had this sort of amazing way of approaching comedy and still does. So
I don't think you could have answered it any better. As a New York City resident, Dave Attell is the New York City comedian.
sure.
Well, thank you so much, Solomon, for your time. We really appreciate it. You've given us so much insight into data, into career, and into the future. We appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.